So, fanfiction. The word fanfiction is used to signify works of fiction created by fans. Said fans take pre-existing characters or people from a setting that is not of their own creation and then write new stories using those characters within a variety of scenarios. And you might be wondering, 1, why am I explaining fanfiction to a bunch of online people? And 2, what does this have to do with Cinderella III? Don't worry, we'll get to that. When inserting those characters within a narrative, there are multiple paths the fic author can choose from. Some of the most common ones include tweaking the ending of the original story so that it fits the author's idea of how the plot should have ended, placing the characters within pre-established scenarios from their own canon in order to develop specific relationships between them, or placing the characters in universes that are entirely different from the ones they came from. I say this, but there are many other choices you can make when deciding the premise for a fic or the direction the characters should follow. Some authors have found mainstream success by writing fanfiction, such as the case with 50 Shades of Grey or the After series, but they tend to be the exception rather than the rule. Fanfiction is, the way I see it, a labor of love. These works are, the vast majority of time, written and published for free in dedicated platforms in order to cater to a specific fanbase. Basically, if you're an author looking for fortune and fame, fanfiction would be a really tough place in which to try and achieve those goals. Even though the genre itself has existed for a very long time in some form or another, arguably for as long as literature itself existed, it gained a lot more notoriety with the internet, since that allowed fan communities to form with a lot more ease, as well as smoothing the process of publishing, hosting, or sharing fan works. And I mention all of this because, now more than ever, fanfiction has transformed itself into a new literary genre, with its own set of tendencies, tropes, and themes. It's the sort of stuff that feels obvious if you're constantly dealing with it, as many people on the internet are known to do, but the study of fanfiction has only recently started to be taken seriously within academic spaces, even though it is a growing field. And I think it's important to recognize the validity of this genre, because it provides a transformative look at previously established universes that isn't found anywhere else, and because the concept of fanfiction still carries a lot of stigma with it. Usually, it is considered to be a quote-unquote lesser form of canon, or a perversion of the original material. I'm not here to argue that every fic out there is a masterpiece, but all other literary genres are littered with works that are less than subpar, and we don't invalidate the genre as a whole because of it, so fanfiction should be no different. And this has all been leading me to my main idea here. Cinderella III, A Twist in Time, feels like fanfiction. And I mean this in the best way possible, and argue that it is the key to why it is the best Disney sequel of all time. What could I mean by that? Let's find out together. I wanna talk about Cinderella III. Cinderella III, A Twist in Time was released in 2007 as a direct-to-video Disney sequel to the original 1950 Cinderella movie. It explores the idea of Cinderella's stepmother turning back time using the fairy godmother's wand in order to revert the princess's wedding and make sure the prince marries one of her daughters instead. Cinderella is one of the most iconic Disney movies, so it's no surprise that it would have been given the sequel treatment when the company was investing in direct-to-video companion films to their animated classics. As I have explored before, those movies were infamous for their shallow plots and cheap animation, and while we all have our favorites of the bunch, it's easy to argue that the majority of those films fall flat when compared to the originals. The way in which these sequels usually work tends to fit into one of three separate categories. They either follow what happened to the characters after the original movie ended, sometimes even exploring the adventures of their children. They can be prequel films dealing with the lives of the characters before the events of the original movies, or they can be what some have nicknamed midquels, stories that happen within the timeline of the original movie, like a side adventure that supposedly took place after the beginning of the plot but before the end of the story. Cinderella III is none of those things. It takes place after the girls' happily ever after, but aside from a quick song at the beginning, they don't attempt to explore much of the princess's future. That burden falls upon Cinderella II: Dreams Come True, but you don't even need to watch the second movie in order to understand the third one. What this movie attempts to do is rewrite the story of the original, imagining an entirely different scenario where the characters we already know get to live an adventure that is dictated by these changes, which in turn are in direct conversation with the original source material. This is an AU. An AU, or alternate universe, is exactly that. A universe that differs from the established canon, like a parallel timeline. In fanfiction, these AUs can range from the most radical of changes, such as putting period piece characters in a modern version of the world or vice versa, or smaller changes, such as an alternate universe where a certain character never died or a certain choice was made differently. Cinderella III is an AU where Lady Tremaine tricks the prince into marrying Anastasia. It is not a direct continuation of the Cinderella story. It is a transformative reinterpretation. So, what happens in Cinderella III exactly? After the events of the original Cinderella movie, our titular princess moves in with the prince, and every day of their lives is a wonderful fairy tale. Meanwhile, Cinderella's stepsisters, Drizella and Anastasia, are the sole target of their mother's abuse, and spend the day performing arduous household chores. Anastasia daydreams of living a romance like Cinderella's, and follows the couple into the woods where they are having an anniversary celebration. She finds out that the fairy godmother was the reason why Cinderella was able to go to the ball, and takes the wand so that she can turn her family's life for the better. Lady Tremaine uses the wand to revert time and make it so that Cinderella was never able to try on the slipper. She uses the same magic to make the shoe fit Anastasia instead, and leaves Cinderella behind as the family moves into the castle. Cinderella is very confused because she knows that she was the one to dance with the prince, and figures that if she got to talk to him, she could fix her situation. When the prince is introduced to Anastasia, he sees that she's not really the lady he had met at the ball and turns her away. But the stepmother bewitches him so that he is convinced Anastasia is the one he fell in love with. The king is thrilled that his son has finally found a bride and welcomes Anastasia into the family. The girl is touched by his kindness and is glad that she is on her way to a romantic happy ending. Cinderella runs into the prince, but he does not recognize her. The mice tell her that he is under a spell, and they try to steal the wand back. Lady Tremaine sees through Cinderella's plan and has her arrested, telling the guards to send her away. The prince had been under the growing impression that something was wrong. Being with Anastasia was off, and he felt a connection to Cinderella that he simply couldn't explain. The mice tell him that he has been bewitched, and that Cinderella is the true owner of the glass slipper, so he rushes out of the castle to find her. Once reunited, Cinderella and the prince decide to get married, but Lady Tremaine casts a spell on Anastasia to make her look like the princess and wishes Cinderella away into a pumpkin carriage. Cinderella escapes this trap and rushes back to the castle, arriving just in time for the fake royal wedding. Anastasia, still looking like Cinderella, realizes that this isn't right. What she wants is someone who will love her for who she is. She refuses to marry the prince in the name of finding her own true love, revealing her mother's plan. And after an epic magic showdown, Lady Tremaine and Drizella are defeated. The royal couple is reunited once more, and they are finally able to live happily ever after. The fairy godmother is immobilized at the start of the movie and only comes back at the end, asking if the characters would like to return to their former lives. But since the past was literally rewritten by the stepmother's actions, No one but the lady and the stepsisters remembers that the year was stolen from them, so to them, this is the only life they have ever known. They don't simply revert back to status quo after the day is saved. Cinderella III becomes the new canon. This is so bonkers to me! Cinderella III has set out to undo the final moments of the original Disney Cinderella movie and completely erase the events of Cinderella II from existence. It's like the company figured that the classic story was fine, but the finale could really use a little more pizzazz, so they decided to rewrite it. Despite the importance of this element, the alternate universe setting isn't the only thing that helps give Cinderella III a fanfiction vibe. Another rather important aspect of the genre is characterization. In other words, how an author portrays the characters they chose to write about. Good characterization is given great prestige within the fanfic community, to the point where a work that is full of grammar mistakes or a poorly developed plot might still be redeemed in the eyes of the public if the characters are well written, which again takes into consideration what had been established by the source material and how these elements are further developed by the fics author. With that said, in order to understand why the characterization in Cinderella III is fantastic, we must turn our eyes not only to the movie itself, but also to the films that came before it. Starting with our protagonist, the Disney Cinderella character we know and love was established in the original 1950s movie. In it, she is presented as a kind and patient woman. Her biggest strength comes from how she is able to keep her spirits high despite being trapped in a toxic household, dreaming of a better life and keeping herself safe until she is given a chance to fulfill her dreams. Even when faced with constant abuse, she never loses her composure or her faith that better days will come, and for that she is rewarded by her fairy godmother. It's wonderfully Christian, but mostly harmless. The figure we are left with is of a woman who won't compromise her beliefs even in the face of adversity, and whose kindness of spirit is absolutely unrelenting. Modern audiences have critiqued the message spread by this movie, saying that Cinderella is too passive when compared to other more contemporary female protagonists, especially with the rise of more empowered Disney heroines. But on the other hand, the idea that one can still keep their chin up when stuck in an abusive situation has been taken as uplifting, proving that there is a lot of power in choosing to remain kind. The first Cinderella sequel, Cinderella II, can be interpreted as an attempt to modernize the character by placing her in situations where she can be more proactive. But the movie suffers from the lack of a cohesive narrative, being just a couple of independent tales roped together, and also from some out-of-character moments, which are subtle but still noticeable.
This hair! Ew!
Cinderella III, on the other hand, takes the qualities that the protagonist has been praised for and puts them to good use, as well as creating a narrative where the girl has a chance to be active without it feeling forced. She is still charming and kind, and chooses to remain that way even when faced with adversity. She isn't locked in a tower, so she gets to actively partake in plans to assure her own freedom. She has actual on-screen conversations with the prince, where you can see how sweet she is and how that was enough to win him over. The Cinderella in this movie feels like the same character as the one from the 50s, just placed within a different scenario. Whatever transformations she has gone through to match the new time period better still manage to feel in character, and the narrative gives us an opportunity to explore a side of her we didn't get to see in the original work. And to the people complaining that Cinderella felt shallow in the original movie, wait until you find out about the prince. Very little is known about him in the 50s film. You get a sense that he's a little picky because the king complains about how he hasn't found a wife yet, and you do see him yawning at that one scene, implying that he is tired of his father's attempts to marry him off. He is barely featured in the sequel too, because there's just nothing interesting about him. In Cinderella III, they took what little information we had and cranked it up to 1 million. The prince is a hopeless romantic who will rely on royal formalities up to the point where it feels fitting, but will disregard them as soon as he is sure of what he wants. He is kind and polite and a bit of an airhead despite his best intentions. He is physically skilled but can be rather impulsive, following his heart more than his brain. He is what intellectuals refer to as a himbo, and he is also a gift to humanity. The thing with the prince in the original movie is that you wouldn't have been able to make him interesting by just giving him a random cool personality. You had to realize the personality he already had, and place him in a situation where he had the necessary room to show it off. These are the characters that make up the story's main couple. But looking at the movie as a whole, it is possible to argue that Anastasia is just as much of a protagonist as Cinderella. Let's take a look at her then. In the original movie, she was just generically mean. Personality-wise, there was no difference between her and Rosella. She is spoiled, disrespectful, and ungrateful, and along with her sister, they represent the opposite of what Cinderella is. There wasn't much to work with if they wanted to redeem the character based on that. But it is here that we must turn our eyes once more to Cinderella II. Despite not bringing much to the table in terms of character development, it did give us a tale that revolutionized Anastasia's figure to a new generation. Her love story with the baker. One of the mini-stories brought to us by the first sequel involves the stepsister falling for one of the villagers. Him being a baker meant that he was below her status, and she knew that she would be rejected by her family if she chose to pursue this relationship. She ends up embarrassing herself upon trying to talk to him, and reconnects with Cinderella in an attempt to learn how to win him over. Despite a few misunderstandings, the couple is able to see eye to eye, and Anastasia chooses him over her family status. Out of the 3 stories told in the sequel, this is the one with the strongest emotional core. Unfortunately, the other 2/3 of the movie have nothing to do with this romance, and we don't even get to see the relationship play out. Either way, this was the movie that cemented Anastasia's status as a character worth redeeming, and in the 3rd movie, they took full advantage of that idea. Anastasia is the one who gets the plot going, with her taking the fairy godmother's wand and accidentally turning her to stone, allowing Lady Tremaine to exact her revenge. Anastasia, along with her sister, is posed as another victim of abuse. With Cinderella gone, there's no one left to shield her from her mother's power and manipulation, and her life has become truly miserable. She envies Cinderella not so much for her status, but for the fact that the girl was able to find true love and escape from Lady Tremaine's grasp. Her actions in this movie come from her wish to do the same, and we get to follow her growing realization that the path her family had been crafting for her is based around the opposite of her desires. If she went through with her mother's plan, she would be stuck in a loveless marriage and would still be under the lady's control. Her choice to expose her mother's trickery at the wedding is her first true step in taking control of her life, and it's achieved through honesty and kindness. Again, the writers took what little material they had and cranked it all up, giving us a characterization of the stepsister that still manages to feel compelling. Part of the art of writing fanfiction, especially of the AU variety, is deciding which elements of the canon should be kept the same and which should be reworked or ignored entirely, establishing a reality that is in direct conversation with the original. The influence of Cinderella II can be felt in other aspects as well, such as the inclusion of Prudence, the castle administrator, which helps flesh out the dynamics of this newly established universe. The other characters are also on point, with Lady Tremaine being twice as scary and manipulative, and with the king being able to show off more of his clumsy dad personality, as well as revealing a more sensitive side, which gives new depths to his determination to finding the prince a wife. And you still might be wondering what's so special about all this. Sure, the characterization is good and the scenario is different, but that's just how sequels work. And while there is truth to that statement, I believe that Cinderella III takes these concepts to new heights. As has been previously stated, fanfiction is a labor of love. It is created by fans who intend to explore the themes and characters of the original work in ways that had never been done before, or with a greater amount of depth. Simply giving the characters a new official sequel does not mean that the work is inherently good or faithful. In fact, many fans have trouble consuming spin-offs or tie-in materials because of the poor treatment and characterization often extended to the elements of the original source, while fanfiction is widely considered to be good when special attention is given to those exact aspects. The characters in Cinderella III have been developed in such a careful and accurate way that it doesn't feel like the amount of thought usually given to Disney sequels. It feels way more nuanced and dedicated, like what has been observed in the fanfiction genre. The idea of placing said characters within a scenario that is not only intriguing, but that also provides them with the perfect opportunities to show their true colors, adds to the transformative mechanisms that turn the plot of this movie into a compelling and engaging narrative. With all of that said, the question remains: is Cinderella III a twist in time fanfiction of Cinderella? And the answer is no. No, it isn't. Fanfiction is a community-based genre that is made by fans for the fans, and Cinderella III is an official Disney Canon entry. But I never meant to argue that it is fanfiction. My point was to say that it feels like fanfiction. What Cinderella III is a good Disney sequel. It's got an exciting story, great characters, and some genuinely funny moments.
Mother, our troubles are over!
A stick.
Ooh, let's beat her with it.
But in order to make Cinderella III, the writers had to borrow from traits that are deeply tied with fanfiction as a literary genre. From the conversations with Canon to the carefulness of the characterization. This movement, whether it was planned or not, strengthened the film to a point that had never been achieved by other Disney sequels, and which has yet to be surpassed. We need to recognize the validity of fanfiction as a literary genre worthy of serious academic study, as well as understand how the properties of said genre can be put to good use in order to create pieces of fiction that are truly memorable. Cinderella III stands as a fantastic example of this, while also being a really fun movie that sets itself apart from the rest in terms of quality and dedication to its premise. Both the sequel and the genre that strengthened it are criminally underrated, and I hope this video has made you appreciate either of them at least a little bit more. Thank you for watching. Well, hello there. It was very nice of you to watch this video. Special thanks to my beautiful patrons for making videos like these possible. You guys make my dreams come true. If you have enjoyed the video, you can also help me out by clicking the like button, subscribing to the channel, and clicking the notification bell too. You can also follow me on Twitter and share this video with your friends. Feel free to leave a comment down below, especially if it is about how much you love Cinderella, or fanfiction. We're all online here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on my next video. Bye!
I forbid you to take another step down these stairs!
Okay.